Carl Jung identified 8 signs of an extremely rare personality type. And if you recognize even half of these traits, you may belong to what I call the psychological elite. In his decades of work, Jung argued that fewer than 5% of people ever develop what he termed differentiated consciousness, a way of experiencing reality that most never reach. Here's the paradox. People like this often move through life believing something is wrong with them. Jung documented case after case of individuals with extraordinary psychological depth who had been taught by culture that their intensity, their sensitivity, and their refusal to accept shallow answers were flaws, when in fact they were signs of exceptional mental sophistication. The most startling realization in Jung's notes wasn't simply that these personalities are uncommon, it was that they seem developmentally ahead. They point toward the next stage of human consciousness. So join me as we descend into the depth of Jungian psychology to uncover these 8 definitive signs of rare personality. If you recognize yourself in the patterns, the story you've been told, that you're too much, will finally make sense. You're not too much for the world. Too often the world has been too little for you. And here is the part modern psychology still hesitates to say out loud. The traits that make you feel like an outsider aren't defects. They're upgrades. You're not broken, you're breakthrough. Jung wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But what happens when who you truly are doesn't fit into society's narrow idea of normal? What if your intensity, your depth, your refusal to settle for a surface-level existence are evidence of what we might call advanced psychological architecture? A mind designed to perceive more, feel more, and make meaning where others only see noise. Think about this from an evolutionary perspective. The people who have pushed humanity forward have always been the ones who wouldn't accept the status quo, the ones who questioned what everyone else took for granted, who felt life fully, who saw possibilities others could not even imagine. The tragic irony is that our culture teaches these exceptional minds to suppress their greatest strengths. Maybe you've been told you're too sensitive, too intense, too complicated. Jung saw those labels for what they often are: misunderstandings of psychological differentiation, the rare capacity to perceive and process reality at multiple layers at once. Modern research has begun to catch up. Psychologist Elaine Aron's work on high sensitivity suggests that around 20% of the population has a nervous system that processes sensory and emotional input more deeply than average. Jung pointed to something even rarer: individuals whose entire psychological structure operates at an advanced level, attention that penetrates, intuition that tracks patterns without effort, awareness that refuses to live on autopilot. And here's the most extraordinary part. People like this often hide their gifts because they've been taught to see them as burdens. You learn to dim your light because others found it threatening. That ends now. Sign 1. You experience emotional depth that feels almost otherworldly. Jung noticed that some people don't merely have emotions. They move through what he called affect-toned complexes, clusters of feeling and meaning that reverberate across the psyche. For you, emotion isn't chaos, it's information. You don't just register a mood, you hear the whole chord. A room can speak before anyone opens their mouth. You feel the temperature change in a relationship long before the conversation catches up. This is not instability, it's refined intelligence. When you feel deeply, you're not overreacting. You're contacting what Jung called the objective psyche, layers of human experience most people have learned to suppress. You sense the unspoken tension, the unasked question, the grief under the joke. Jung said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. For you, almost everything becomes a doorway into understanding of others and of yourself." Sign 2. You question reality with sacred curiosity. Most people live unexamined lives. You can't. You don't just ask what, you ask why. Why do we stay in relationships that shrink us? Why do we protect systems that don't support human flourishing? Why do we pretend that small talk is connection? Jung would recognize the transcendent function at work, the psyche's ability to imagine beyond current limits and create a third way where stale binaries trap everyone else. While others accept the script, you're already envisioning what could be truer, cleaner, more humane. Your questions threaten comfortable illusions, not because you're combative, but because truth disrupts what's convenient. So when someone tells you that you think too much or ask too many questions, translate it. Your curiosity is touching a place their defenses protect. My curiosity is sacred, not because I'm superior, but because I refuse to live asleep. Sign 3. You've developed conscious independence. Jung wrote, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. Rare personalities don't arrive there by preference. They arrive by necessity. Depending on others for worth becomes psychological quicksand, so you build from the inside out. You stood, often alone, and formed an identity no absence or opinion can confiscate. Jung called this individuation, the long journey toward wholeness. Most people never finish because it requires meeting the shadow, the parts of ourselves we were taught to reject. Your solitude is not exile, it's sanctuary. It's where you remember who you are beneath roles and expectations. You come back to the world with a spine and a soft front, able to love, but unwilling to negotiate your self-respect. Sign 4. You possess hyperperceptive awareness. Jung revolutionized psychology by treating intuition as a real way of knowing, perception via the unconscious that brings forth ideas, images, and exits from stuck places before the linear mind can explain why. You don't just observe people, you read signatures, the micro-expression at the edge of a smile, the energy drop after a careless comment, the sentence someone can't finish. When a friend says, "I'm fine," but their entire field says distress, you feel it in your bones. When a room hums with tension others ignore, you register it instantly. That isn't paranoia, it's fine-grained sensitivity. Yet Jung warned that without boundaries, this gift will hollow you out. Unprotected, you become the uncontracted therapist of every space, regulating conversations and carrying pain that isn't yours. Your task is not to shut down, it's to shield wisely, so your perception can serve without consuming you. Sign 5. You crave meaning above everything else. Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." Certain types simply cannot survive imitation. Maybe you tried the acceptable script, perform well, collect applause, keep the peace. And yet, after the wins, a lucid emptiness remained, the sense that you'd betrayed something essential. Jung noted that when we live against our nature, the psyche protests. He called them neurotic symptoms. That protest isn't weakness, it's guidance. You can't pretend shallow goals matter. You can't celebrate achievements without substance. You can't build convenience-based relationships and call them connection. So you pivot toward what is real. And as you do, something remarkable happens. Your energy stops leaking. You become more productive by doing fewer things with truer intention. People call it stubbornness. Really, it's alignment. Sign 6. You've outgrown people and environments repeatedly. Jung wrote, "The greatest tragedy of the family is the unlived lives of the parents." What happens when you refuse an unlived life? Growth asks you to shed skins. You felt the discomfort of realizing people who knew you no longer do. Not because you've turned difficult, but because you stopped paying the tax of self-betrayal that kept them comfortable. Jung called this psychological death and rebirth. There will be invitations back into the old costume. Be smaller, be simpler, be predictable. You can love the past and still refuse to return to it. Once you see behind the curtain of conditioning, unconscious conformity is impossible. If your change makes others uneasy and they keep asking for the old you, it's time to say, with kindness and clarity, my evolution is not negotiable. Sign 7. You create transformational presence. Jung observed that the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. Some people catalyze that reaction by simply being congruent. Around you, others feel seen. You listen beneath words, resist rushing to fix, allow truth to emerge. This is not manipulation. It's authentic presence that invites honesty. But the gift can drain you when you give it without consent or limit. Highly empathic minds often slip into helper syndrome, unconscious self-sacrifice that serves no one in the end. The task isn't to care less, it's to add discernment so your care remains clean. You're allowed to ask, do you want ideas or do you want me to listen? You're allowed to say, I don't have capacity for this today. Your gift works best when you protect it. Sign 8. You sense a purpose that can be felt before it can be named. Jung said, who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens. If you've carried a steady sense that you're meant for something more than the ordinary, Jung would recognize the psyche's drive toward individuation and creative expression. This is not about fame, it's about fit, aligning your life with your deepest pattern. Ignore the call and symptoms multiply. Anxiety, flatness, loss of meaning. Jung's most profound insight here is that your calling isn't merely personal, it's transpersonal. You are not here only to fulfill yourself. You are here to serve the evolution of consciousness through the precise shape of your gifts. Jung also mapped typical stages for rare personalities. Stage 1, the unconscious outsider. You feel different and mislabel it defect. The persona, the social mask, hardens so you can pass for normal. You perform, you blend, you dim. But the cost accumulates as fatigue and quiet resentment. Stage 2, the awakening individual. You begin to see your traits as potential rather than problem. You study typology, you start shadow integration, and you set boundaries that protect what is real. You stop apologizing for your depth and start organizing your days around it. You seek and find people who can meet you at that level. Stage 3, individuated consciousness. Your rare traits consolidate into a coherent identity. You understand your purpose and live it with continuity. You carry warmth and backbone at once. Your very presence becomes permission for others to be themselves. With this orientation come predictable shadows. The superiority trap, confusing different with better, closes your world and freezes your learning. The messianic trap, believing it's your job to wake or heal everyone, leads to burnout and resentment. The martyr trap, equating depth with endless suffering, steals joy and intimacy. Jung's remedy is not to erase these pulls, but to make them conscious so they don't drive your life from the dark. True rarity includes the wisdom to know when to speak and when to be quiet, when to offer your gift and when to conserve it, when to lead and when to follow without losing your center. Relationships reveal another pattern. Some people try to possess your light, some feel threatened by it. A few can match it. The light seeker is drawn to your energy but hasn't done their inner work. They want therapist, guru, source of meaning. They love your gifts more than your whole person. The light dimmer asks you to tone it down, be reasonable, stop being so complicated. Your authenticity highlights their own inauthenticity. and that stings. The light matcher is rare and precious, someone who has done their psychological work and can meet you at depth without consuming or diminishing you. Jung noticed that when rare personalities navigate relationships consciously, they become mirrors that help others glimpse their own potential. The key skill is psychological discrimination, sensing who can engage in authentic relationship and who is asking for something else you are not obligated to give. And with rarity comes responsibility. You are not different for vanity. You are different in service to human growth. Jung believed that such individuals act as bridges between the unconscious world of symbol and the conscious world of action. Through your depth, your questions, and your refusal to accept counterfeit answers, you help the collective mature. This is why ordinary scripts feel empty. This is why surface-level connection drains you. This is why you would rather be alone than pretend. Your psyche knows you have work to do, and that work requires authenticity, depth, and courage. Be careful, though, of psychological inflation, the temptation to believe that being rare makes you superior. The right posture is humble power, knowing you're special without making anyone else smaller. Your sensitivity is intelligence. Your intensity is exactly what some moments require. Your refusal to settle is how consciousness evolves. Jung also hinted that as humanity develops, more people will display these traits. What is rare today may become common tomorrow as our species grows in psychological sophistication. That doesn't make your path less meaningful. It makes it pioneering. Seen this way, your struggles change their meaning. Every time you felt like an outsider, you were actually scouting new terrain for human potential. Every time you were criticized for being too much, you were demonstrating possibilities that threatened cramped worldviews. Every time you chose authenticity over acceptance, you expanded what relationship could be. Every time you refused shallow meaning, you raised the bar for life itself. You are not merely living your life, you are expanding what it means to be human. Yes, the path can be lonely. Yes, it demands courage most people will never need. But Jung believed that people like you are essential for our collective evolution. Your intensity wakes a numbed culture. Your sensitivity perceives what others miss. Your insistence on meaning drags the conversation upward. So remember what Jung identified about the extremely rare. These 8 signs aren't scattered quirks. They're evidence of advanced psychological architecture. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. For people like you, that means accepting that you operate with a level of refinement many never reach. Your emotional depth isn't oversensitivity, it's high-resolution intelligence. Your constant questioning isn't negativity, it's conscience refusing to shrink. Your independence isn't isolation, it's sovereignty. Your hyper-awareness isn't paranoia, it's intuition working as designed. Your craving for meaning isn't impractical, it's your soul insisting on alignment. Your pattern of outgrowing isn't coldness, it's evolution in motion. Your transformational presence isn't manipulation, it's authenticity making room for truth. Your not yet named purpose isn't confusion, it's potential asking to be expressed. If even half of these signs resonated, you're not just different, you're part of the next step Jung envisioned, toward greater awareness, deeper truth, and more honest connection. It will take courage, it will take patience, but you weren't built to be smaller, quieter, or more convenient. You were built to be exactly what you are, psychologically rare and unashamed of it. If you're ready to stop apologizing for the traits that make you extraordinary, say it clearly. I am psychologically rare, and I'm done dimming my light. Share this with someone who needs to remember their own rarity, and keep building a life that makes room for the whole of who you are. Because you are not too much, the world has simply been too little, and as Jung knew, people like you are the ones who change that.